Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Every Calorie Counts podcast. This is our first episode of 2024. Happy New Year. We have a special guest, Sarah Bishop, today. We're going to kind of dive into Sarah's background, business stuff, personal stuff. And yeah, Sarah, if you want to introduce yourself, go ahead.
Hi guys. Yeah, I'm honored to be first episode of the year. Um, my name is Sarah Bishop. I am an online coach. I started coaching in 2018. Actually, my first coaching job was an in-person health coach at a meal prep company here in Florida. And really just, I was, always kind of athletic growing up, started getting into lifting, around, college, like in college more seriously, and kind of stumbled upon like the bodybuilding world. And I was at the University of South Florida at the time and got introduced to Dr. Bill Campbell and his lab and decided to redirect from the nursing track in my undergrad and get my master's in exercise science, and worked in his lab, was able to be, kind of a little lab rat in some of the case studies on some bodybuilders, some refeed diet break stuff. So yeah, and then just it kind of progressed from there into coaching, and that's where I'm at now. Just started a new business with my good friend Meredith, and Fortify Health Coaching, so we can get into that maybe too. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
A little bit about me.
Meredith's been on the show before, so some people will be
Okay.
familiar with her. So now knowing what you know now versus then when you decided nursing, how happy are you that you didn't go into the nursing field and decided to go this route?
I am. I'm very like at the time, like it was such a back and forth thing. Like I remember like just, having like yeah, it's so funny, right? Like thinking back like what we stressed about in college, like to now. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely somebody that I think I need to work for myself. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
learned
well,
that. I
we
learned that real quick.
we we actually we get we're in such a populated area that we literally have a hospital like every it seems like every township has their own hospital here. So the amount of nurses that we're inundated with, and then the amount of honestly, I would say at any given time we have well over a dozen nurses on our team. If and that might even be selling it short in some
I
cases. It
think
feels
short.
like. Yeah, but the overnight shifts, the rigors of the job as far as the go, it's like everything within that field, as far as at least working in the hospitals, from what I know anyway,
mhm.
is so like counter what it is that we're teaching people in so many cases too. It's just those are really tough cases in a lot of in a lot of instances.
Yeah,
So
it's just nervous system overload.
yeah, big time. And then curious, what meal prep company was it?
It was called Fit Life Foods.
Okay,
I don't know if you ever
I'm
heard of that.
definitely
It was like a
no,
local one, not like one of the um,
gotcha.
bigger nationwide ones.
Yeah, what's the really big one that came from down there? Fresh meal plan, something or other. It's a big one though that's down there. There obviously there's a couple in Florida that were really big, but one recently actually ended up selling. But anyway, I worked in the meal prep industry too for a little
So
while there. So
Oh,
I have a
what's that?
question. So once you linked up doing research and decided to do your exercise science master's, um, did you know that you wanted to do coaching? 'Cause I feel like at that time, coaching wasn't a huge thing like it is now. Like it's so oversaturated. Were you thinking of more like, I don't know, like personal training or I don't know, other things? Like how did you lead into online coaching since you did say that you started in 2018?
yeah, I actually did go in with the idea of becoming an online coach. And
Okay.
Oh,
I think again, like, you're kind of a product of your environment to a degree. So down here in Tampa, I knew Lauren Conlon, I knew Paul Ravella, and I knew these Blaine Norton. So I knew these people and they were also associated with USF. Lauren was a couple years ahead of me in the master's, program. So I knew it was a career. Like I knew like these people were doing well with it. And, I would see them at shows and stuff in Tampa. So I knew it was a possibility. And I was interested in like S&C, going that route, but talked to Dr. Campbell, about that or the research route as a career. And it just, wasn't, for me, what I,
Yeah.
saw myself doing. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of unique. And, I'm definitely really grateful that, I do live here and was around those people and, got to meet them. And I also just, put myself in a lot of situations to like be around those people and like learn and kind of just network and stuff because I knew that was also important. You guys know, in
Yeah.
Yeah,
this
for
field for
sure.
Yeah.
sure.
Well, it's also, I mean, that's the story, because we've had Paul and Lauren on too. I mean, that's kind of like their story almost to a T too, where like they found themselves in certain, Paul with Lane actually, where he
Yeah.
found himself in a certain, yeah, put himself there over, and it was like, like you said, the people that surround you, that environment that you're in, kind of, has a part in shaping you and kind of mold you. So that's pretty cool. So getting into the kind of initial background for you in terms of your own physique journey and kind
Mhm.
of, maybe even how that's developed your coaching skill set a little bit and how that's helped you work with different clients. But obviously starting with, where that kind of, started for Sarah in terms of, just honestly physique augmentations. I know you said the sports background that you had a little bit there, but when did it transition into something that was specifically, this is my body, this is the way I want it to look, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say that like getting into lifting, like, seeing like I remember the first Hattie Boyle and um
Mm,
like
mm,
Lauren Simpson. Like I remember like seeing
yeah,
like some of their like I don't remember the websites, but like those blogs that used to have like the interviews of like the
yeah.
fitness models and like had their workouts and whatever. So like I stumbled upon that like early college, like after high school. And, up until that time, so I developed an eating disorder when I was 14. So I struggled with anorexia for a while. So like from I would say like 14 until like 20. Was
Wow.
kind of dealing with that back and forth, went to treatment a couple times. And it was when I went to treatment a couple times and then relapsed again, and that's where I was kind of like, what the hell am I doing? Like this is not how I want to live, anymore, and I don't want to keep doing this back and forth thing. And I did use training and lifting to kind of help me recover and pull out of that because I was like, okay, like I know I have to feed myself to train like this. And, I know I want to move my body and I don't want to like be weak and, have no energy. And I mean, there was, physique goals, tied to it. And, you know, I don't necessarily think like that's the right way to recover to be like, oh, I'm going to gain muscle and, not gain any body fat. But I
Yeah.
learned along the way that, the body fat has to come with it. And, I was, educated enough that I knew what I was doing was not healthy, and having low levels of body fat and whatnot. So anyway, yeah, I would say it was like, in that kind of, first, year or two of college that I, started being more consistent with the weight floor and not, the treadmill and, started like focusing on like eating more. And I remember like reading those interviews and being, seeing they squatted and, they were eating like 6 meals a day and like stuff like that. And like, granted, it wasn't, what we would maybe recommend now, but, it was
Yeah.
definitely not what I was doing before.
Yeah, Hattie Boyle like hip thrusting like 5 plates on each side. That's why the timeline there got a little skewed for me because you started talking about her and Lauren and then went into the eating. So it's like you found them at that like 20-year-old mark where you're kind of
Yeah, like
coming
more
out of
that
that.
transition
Yeah.
kind of
Like
period.
they
Yeah.
help with the a little bit of inspiration there to kind of get you. So obviously, that's a big transition. And I think that's where it should like kind of open up and be something where it's more along the lines of people looking at that. I feel like it's going to close the audience off a little bit, where it's like, oh, this person, dealt with being too skinny, right? Where it's like we have so many people that we work with, all three of us, that are dealing with being, in different positions as far as maybe being overweight or just not happy with the
Mhm.
way their body looks for different purposes, right? But at the same time, there's a story here where it's more along the lines of like being comfortable with your body, right? And being able to find that comfort level with your body, being able to find that ability to, kind of, move forward as far as your goals are concerned and take it day by day. So what was that whole process kind of like in terms of the mental side of it, the emotional side of it?
Yeah, God, I mean, it was definitely not linear, and
Of course.
I think, that goes for anyone. And I know, like, my story, it's like, oh, okay, like from a society standard, like, yeah, my stuff is easier, right? Like, it's, I think easier to go that way than the other way.
Yeah.
Is what it is. So like I definitely acknowledge that. But I mean, it's still, really freaking hard. And
Mhm.
um, I mean, maybe even harder, in some regards when,
That's what I was
Yeah, I
gonna
was gonna
say.
say
Yeah,
I
it
wouldn't
depends how you look at it.
necessarily just call it easier straight up because after, dealing with anorexia, I mean, I can't speak to your situation exactly, but like so many people struggle with just like being so low for so long that they can't get their period back. They have an irregular cycle for extended periods of time and it's just really, really hard to get back to like a healthy spot for them.
yeah. Well, yeah. And that was the later part of my journey too, because I was on birth control, during, all of this too. So, but yeah, I mean, back to your question, like, I mean, I think it ultimately came down to like one day I was just like, and again, like being a little bit of a nerd, I was like, I'm gonna see this as an experiment. I'm just gonna do
Mhm.
this. And I know I can go back to restricting. I know I can go back to doing the cardio. Like I know that's easy for me to do. And, just flipping that switch to be like, no, I'm gonna like show up. I'm gonna eat,
Yeah, do the
whatever,
hard shit.
5 meals, I'm gonna not get on the treadmill, et cetera, et cetera. And it just kind of slowly built from there. I was weighing myself and like was trying to like make sure that I, continued to
Mhm.
gain weight and like disassociate from the scale because I knew like the more I kind of just saw those numbers, the less it would, get to me. Um, and I just didn't want it to like control me. That was the big thing is like, and I think that was also a big moment was realizing this thing, eating disorder, like that I was using for control, to control my body, control my life, with my food, with my exercise, was leaving me completely out of control. And I was like, okay, something's got to give here. So I almost kind of shifted that control into something that I felt was productive, something that was, more empowering, with, trying to build muscle. And, I didn't necessarily want to compete then, but I liked the look and I liked how it felt, leaving the gym after, a good workout and, starting to get into the weight floor and whatnot. Like I remember the first time I squatted like in a squat rack, like how big of a deal that was, and like how good that felt.
Yeah,
Damn,
I think
I love
we
it.
realized that Marina just learned how to squat like a day ago. So
Hey,
we watched her. We know
I
we're
didn't
just
learn, I tried.
yeah, we tried. No, but so that it's interesting though because it's one of those things where you kind of just eliminated the idea of going from one area that some people might say is a little obsessive into another area. And we've all seen this where people now get into the fitness world and it's almost like they take that same level of
Yeah.
obsession and they tie it to the fitness world and it's almost like they're going too far maybe in that direction now to the point where it's, again, that U-shaped curve. We're on the other side of that sooner rather than later, where it starts off in this initially healthy way, but then, before you know it, they're in the gym 7 days a week. They're maybe, eating more food, but it's not up to where they should be given their expenditure at this point, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, obviously, for you, it might be a little bit different because of your education, because of, obviously you have a certain level of intuitiveness here with this, right? So you were able to kind of figure this out. Did you figure it out on your own? Were you working with somebody at the time? And that's kind of question A. And then I have a follow up leading to where I was going with that.
Yeah. So and it definitely was not linear. So it was starting out like training 5, 6 days a week, like too much volume, like still like, not really eating the right carbs, all that kind of, stuff too. Was kind of and then it,
It wasn't perfect.
progressed. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
did hire I hired I had a coach. Well, my husband actually, he was my boyfriend then, helped me out a lot as far as like the training side of things. And helping me be more confident, like, with my form and stuff, so that I wasn't, because I think that's a lot of thing for a lot of people, right? Is you do the
Mhm.
cardio because I know how to run, or we
Yep.
think we know how to run.
Yeah.
We know how to get on the elliptical, but we don't have that confidence on the weight floor. So I think that's huge, is like just building some
100%.
confidence with that. But yeah, so he helped me a lot there. And then I did hire a coach. She was like an online coach and it was okay. had like programmed like 10 sets of 10 for squats. And like in
Yeah.
hindsight, I'm like, what the fuck? But
Yeah.
whatever. I didn't know, I did it. And then
Right.
I hired my
Actually, I couldn't think of a worse scenario to program 10 sets of 10. Like, hi,
Yeah.
like I've been under eating for God knows how long. I clearly have some adrenaline to make whatever is
yeah.
going on here. It's like, okay, cool. Go do 10 sets of 10 for squats.
Yeah, I'm like, not a typo, but I don't even think I
Yeah.
asked if it was a typo. I just did it, you know,
Yeah.
'cause, like,
Right. Of course. Yeah.
okay. But yeah, I hired my first, I would say, like, good coach in, I guess it was 2018. Stephen Bogrian from Team Pro Physique.
Yeah.
And that was my first, like, okay, like this is more evidence-based, like,
Yeah.
macros, that sort of thing. I was doing my own macros and doing all that on my own. And, again, like you said, I did know enough to, like, 1 gram per pound of body weight and, kind of knew how to distribute things and whatnot. But yeah, and then it just kind of progressed from there. So I definitely had help, and I knew like that the importance of that. I think I knew I needed accountability, and I knew like my tendencies to like overdo things, and I wanted someone to help me check that. Um, yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say, well, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just gonna say, what about outside of the fitness realm? Was there anything that was brought in outside of the, like you said, you went to a treatment facility and whatnot, but what about just continued ongoing help from a emotional standpoint through this process?
Yeah, that's a good point. I do want to mention that I did work with a therapist all throughout this time too, and I feel like that's also really important. Like if you are somebody struggling with, any type of eating disorder, is to have somebody on the mental health
Mhm.
standpoint, because at the end of the day, it's not about the food. It's just, that's your outlet, right? It is, it could be drugs, it could be whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was, really important. And my therapist was awesome. And, as I continue to do like the coaching and the bodybuilding thing and career, like she was, really, because I remember like telling her, like, am I being disordered by pursuing this? Like, because people, because the recovery community, like, what I'm telling you is like not,
Yep.
necessarily like recovery, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, again, like I was talking to her, was having these conversations, was kind of like laying my soul on the table, in these sessions. And,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I think only you know your intentions. And
Yeah.
I think it just continued to evolve for me. But I knew like my head and heart were in the right place. And, I knew enough about myself because, like I said, I started therapy in like 2014 for this thing. So like I had a lot
Mm.
of self, kind of awareness, um, maybe to a fault sometimes.
Yeah.
But I was able to kind of use that to kind of like just make sure that I was kind of staying, on track and not getting too like you said, too obsessive one way or the other.
Mhm. And what about, you mentioned the significant other that was still with you at the time, or I guess is still with you now,
Yeah,
however you want to, yeah,
he's
verbalize that.
downstairs.
But yeah, there you go. But how big of a role did he play as a support system here, and how much did you maybe confide in him or use him to that extent? Like, how big of a role was that? Did he play in
Yeah,
that?
I mean, honestly, huge. Like he, was always really supportive. I mean, the body image stuff, like, all that, I feel like, I mean, I struggled with the body image side of things for, a really long time, especially like, I don't want to jump, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but like, so I competed in 2019, and that was a big test. But, as far as like, was I able to diet and not let it,
Yeah, yeah,
run away and then gain weight
yeah.
after? And then like, through
That's
that,
what I was curious. Yeah.
yeah, through that off season, like I would say the last couple of years, like, last year or two, like I really don't struggle with body image all that much. But like there was definitely a lot of times that I did, and he was always, I didn't talk about it a lot or to anyone, but like, he would kind of get the brunt of it sometimes. But he
Okay.
was always,
Yeah.
kind of supportive, and, I don't know, guys like curves too, so that always helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
So, so you started working with Steven in 2018, you said?
Yeah, yeah.
And then did you do your first prep with him in 2019?
Yeah. So I
Like
competed.
how did you get to competing?
Yeah, so I had been like lifting and, in the gym and all that. I wouldn't say I was even really like doing things totally properly, but worked with him pretty much all of 2018, and then we started a prep in 2019. Yeah. And I prepped January, and my show was like June 1st. Um, and I got last place. And my feedback was, are you guys ready? So Stephen was great. He like marched me down to the judges table to ask for feedback afterward. And he looks over at the judges like notes, and he's like, he starts laughing. I'm like, what does it say? He goes, EAT. It said eat. Because I was
that's that might be better feedback than some people get sometimes. Usually they're like, oh, you need to be fuller, you need to be
right.
rounder. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
Well,
at least they're
no,
more
you
direct.
need no, and then
Yeah,
I talked to the judges, and they're like, you have the shape, you have the structure, you're too lean, and you need more size, was the
yeah.
feedback.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, like, and yeah, like I said, that prep was a big test, as far as like more so the test of like, can I come out of this? Can I
Yeah.
not stay here? And I could, it wasn't easy. Like it was, it was hard a little bit. Like, yes and no. Like, I think I was honestly like triggered by myself in a sense. Like, I did not like being that lean. Like, and that was like a big shift. I was like, I look like a anatomy poster. Like I
So do you feel like you got that much leaner for the show than maybe between that period of being 14 and 20 and the anorexia spell? Do you think there was a
it's hard to say because I do feel like I was, but I also like felt like I saw myself more realistically in 2019
there's
than I
clearly
did.
improvement there? Yeah.
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 So I think I saw myself more realistically, and I think I had a little more muscle. So like, weight wise, it wasn't my lowest weight ever. It was really low. I was 90, I was like 94 pounds on stage. And then the next day I dropped to like 92 pounds, that cortisol
Yeah.
drop.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so I was freaking tiny. I'm 5'4". Um,
Wow. Yeah. She's
but
Alyssa, basically.
yeah, so I was
Little.
little.
Yeah. We so if I back up just a smidge before going into the show, was there we talked about the mental health and all that different stuff, but was there a point in time where you kind of analyzed everything from internal health perspective, where you got blood work to make sure that everything was good? So what about your cycle? Did your cycle come back at that point?
Yeah, no. So that was the part that I didn't really start working on till like after my show. Again, like I didn't know what I knew like about like
Of
functional
course.
health,
Yeah, of
you
course.
know, then like, like I do now. And
Mhm.
yeah, so no, I didn't get any blood work besides, like yearly whatever the doctors do. I didn't even know to ask for it. I was on birth
Mhm.
control all through this, all throughout this
Oh, really?
time
Okay.
period. So, um, yeah, so, wasn't, I didn't get a cycle, but, birth control, how much did that
Yeah.
have to do with it? So, yeah, so like after my show in 2019, like toward the end of the year, I was like 6 months post show, and I just was like, this is not right. Like, I'm not feeling good. Like, my energy's low, my hair's still thin. Granted, like I didn't gain weight fast enough, I don't think, post show. And I think that was part of it. Like, I think I probably should have gained body fat quicker and been pushed to do that. Um, but yeah,
It's
so
also one of those ones though that's a tough one though. I've cut you off like 97 times. I
no.
apologize.
There's so many
Yeah.
things that we could go off on this. So with
Yeah.
the functional
Um,
health, yeah,
I think that's an interesting one as far as the post show thing. Like Marina will tell you, like we're pretty like, and we have been for many years now. Like to me, it's very important to like, and I don't know how you want. Again, I think the verbiage has so much to do with things in our industry for some reason. So it's like instead of the reverse diet, the recovery diet, maybe, or whatever yeah, whatever you want to call it. But again, just getting those calories up a little bit sooner. So for you, it was more of like that reverse diet where it was like the intricate, like here's 20 carbs, here's 20 carbs. It wasn't like an immediate here, let's get you back to whatever the baseline is at 1800 calories.
right, exactly. And I think, and that's why like I'm so big, like, for my clients and like on social media of like, you know, a healthy body is a responsive body. Like we gotta like treat this like post-show phase as like a health phase, because it's not going to be productive until,
Right.
you know, we get, you know, your hormones back online, get some healthy levels of body fat, or even like, you know, girls, you know, coming to me like, you know, who are like, you know, coming out of, you know, eating disorders and whatnot. They're like, I want to build muscle. And it's like, hey, we're not just gonna like just build muscle, right? Like it's not like,
Yeah.
you know, and that's what I thought too. You know, I thought, oh, I'll just slab on muscle. You know, I'm not going to gain any body fat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look like Hattie Boyle after a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
LOL. Like,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, and you don't know what you don't know. But I think just like really like someone to like flat out tell you, like, no, you need to gain body fat to feel better. Like, this needs to happen. So yeah, so that's when I started like diving deeper into the functional health stuff though on my own, like that, you know, end of 2019. um got a semi look at my thyroid, and you know, I think my free T4 was like a point 0.7.
Mm,
You know, was on birth
right over the
control
range.
still.
Yeah.
And then 2020 was when I started just really prepping my body to go off birth control, because I knew, having been on it for like 7 years and my history combined with that, there was going to be, you know, some work, some support that was needed.
Well, let me ask before. So now you're already, you know, what, a year post show at the time that you're coming off of birth control, give or take.
Yeah.
So up until that point, though, you are fully immersed in this world in terms of, you know, the education, the coaching at this point, now even competing and being around all these people that are, you know, at no point was there a conversation or maybe an inclination or just, and I'm sure internally you kind of knew and thought about it a little bit, but was it just like, hey, I'm worried about coming off of birth control? I mean, we all know what birth control does really, really well in
Yeah.
terms of preventing babies, right? So was it more, was that more important at that time, or was it just more along the lines of like, you know, an uneducated, like nobody had that conversation with you?
As far as the decision to come off, or
Yeah, in terms of like, hey, where your body is at now, right?
yeah.
In terms of like a full, essentially what would be a full recovery for anybody coming out of that anorexia phase, and then even post show, it's like, how would we ever really achieve full recovery if we have something in there that is replacing those
Right.
endogenous hormones and really get that full signaling back and all that good stuff, right?
And that's my whole thing with the birth control, right? Is like, and because I don't want anyone to demonize it necessarily, but like you got to look at your history. And I knew it, like, again, like I'm more educated, I know all this stuff now, so I'm like, okay, I got my period for the first time when I was 14, and
Mm,
then I developed an eating disorder,
Yeah.
right.
so that went away immediately. And then I was on birth control for 7 years.
So you
So I
basically
thought
hadn't had, and how old were you at the point that you decided to
I would
take?
have been 20, so I would have been 10 years essentially.
So 10 years,
Mm,
basically no real, like,
Right.
period, no real
Almost
ovulation.
a primary amenorrhea case, you
Yeah.
know?
yeah. Yeah.
So, so yeah. So I think like just knowing all that, like again, like getting into the world of functional medicine at this point, like just reading more, I was like, okay, like this is not good.
Not, yeah, not good.
I
Yeah.
had I had osteopenia, which I've
Mm,
reversed, which is awesome.
right.
Um, but I knew that was, you know, bone health, like all of the things. Like I wanted to have a family someday, you know, etc. So that was all kind of behind like why I wanted to come off the pill and, you know, get back, you know, get a regular cycle back.
So again, I think my question was more, and you kind of you open it up a little bit in terms of the you know, not demonizing it, and so just to like open up that a little bit, and just that was kind of
Yeah.
my point with saying like, was being on birth control more important than the other things? Because I think that's a legitimate, you know, thing. That's what we tell everybody
Yeah.
is like,
Yeah.
hey, you know, here's what birth control is really good at. It. This is very like much important for you. Then, you know, let's you know, find the workaround
Work with it,
and make
yeah.
sure that we're living a healthy lifestyle around that. But then on the other side of that, we all know that these things are prescribed for many different reasons at
Mhm.
this point, right? And there's obviously always maybe some of fear attached, but I think the biggest issue here is just educating somebody on, you know, where I don't think there's enough education out there on birth control, period, right? But specifically when a young female is put on it for other reasons than just contraception, right? So it's one of those things where I think I'm curious, did somebody have that conversation with you, or was it just more of a realization on your own end, like you knew better, or not
Yeah,
better, but you know what I
no,
mean? You knew.
definitely a realization on my own end. Like,
Okay.
and I did go on the pill for birth control. Like, not really realizing I probably wasn't fertile at that time,
Yeah.
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 but
Which
um
nobody assume you're not fertile, please. You know what I
right, yeah.
mean?
Yeah, no one just assumed that. Like,
Yeah.
but anyway, because you'll find out, right? But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I no one had that conversation because I went to Planned Parenthood to get the pill, like in the first place. So there
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
Yeah,
zero
so
conversation.
it's a curiosity. It's a curiosity because that's still one of those places where, again, back to the demonizing it, where it's like a tough line, like it's a tough conversation sometimes. You know what I mean? Where you're like, I'm just some tattooed guy from Instagram. You know what I mean? And like
Well,
I'm having
yeah,
a conversation with a female about this versus their physician,
Yeah.
especially when they're coming to us. And we just talked to somebody that
Yeah.
was
I was,
literally prescribed a lifestyle client that
yeah.
was prescribed 10 milligrams of testosterone, right? Because she went to the doctor not feeling well. And we have the labs that the doctor looked at. I mean, her testosterone was 7, her
No, her
estrogen was
testosterone was 3.
unrecognizable. Okay, but estrogen was off the table, progesterone was off
yeah.
the
Yeah.
table, obviously. But again, they didn't give her specifications in terms of when to get the blood work, so we have no idea where it's at within that cycling. And then on top of that, they didn't take into consideration the fact that she was on birth control. They just slapped on the TRT, and now we go back to why were you on birth control to begin with, and it was
And
for
she was on
acne,
it for acne.
right? For over 7 years. And so again, it's just one of those things where it's sometimes it's that's a very real delicate line
Yeah.
sometimes to be able to maneuver. So I was curious if and obviously nobody did, but curious how that conversation went and if there was a conversation with one of the coaches that you worked with. So now we're about a year post show, right? You've decided to kind of go that road of and especially when you're doing it on your own. I know I can attest this. It's one of those things where it seems like you're going away from what your goal was there for a year, which is progress. You're probably still motivated that time in terms of your bikini
Mhm.
competing and really wanted to do that. Did you feel like this was going to be something where it's taking you away from that progress for a period of time in terms of that healing, or did you view it as more this is a necessity for my progress eventually, which I think is one of those things that it depends on the mentality and how people are delivered this process.
Yeah, I definitely saw it as part of the process and part of
Cool.
where I wanted to be. Like, we don't know for sure, but like I was like, I have no hormones, so this probably isn't helping my muscle growth, birth control or not. Right. So
Yeah.
I knew,
Yeah.
that was important. I knew my thyroid, getting that back online was important. And I also knew there was a lot more to this than was at my level, at the time. And I started working with Victoria Felkar
Nice.
in like February or March, or it was like right around like COVID time, actually, like shutdown time.
Mhm.
That I started working with her to kind of really like prep my body to come off the pill. And I mean, 2020 was wild, right? It's like for all of us.
Yeah.
Like we were supposed to get married in March. We ended up getting married later that year in August. But so like through all this time, like, end of 2019, I graduated grad school. So like I was doing all the life gain stuff too. And that was, I think I saw it like my off season as like the time to do that. And I think it is, the time to do that is to pursue, all sorts of goals and gains, outside of just, the ones in the gym.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So you obviously you got the lab work, right? Was that with Victoria? Like, did she or did you have that lab work and then you decided to hire somebody to help you kind of look at that and improve it?
Yeah, I got the lab work and then I hired Victoria after that, like a couple months after that. And she guided me to then start doing that's 2020 is like that's when like I became more familiar with like life extension and paying out of pocket
Yeah,
for stuff. So
right.
from there I started doing more like on my own, like paying for stuff out of pocket and kind of tracking,
Investing in it.
monitoring, from there.
Yeah.
But she taught me a lot. I
What
mean, working through her, like, with her definitely shaped a lot of how I see stuff now and how I do stuff, as a coach.
what was the process like as far as prepping to come off?
A lot of, for me, like, and this would, I tell people too, is like you assess like what are your big rocks? Like what are the big things that are going to move the dial? Like, and with amenorrhea, any amenorrhea case or coming off birth control, like I always explain to people, it's about making your body feel safe, right? Safe enough to reproduce. So for me, like, she really took inventory of like my habits along with, my blood work, because you can see a lot from, a CMP and a CBC and, kind of get some indication about what areas need support, even if you don't have like full lab work. And for me, it was like a lot of my lifestyle habits. Like I had a really terrible habit of fasting until like 12, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, running on coffee all morning. And, I think it was like easy for me too at that time, like COVID, like we were all just like working from home and, dialing into like, business stuff and, the day gets away from you. So like looking at like all the ways I was like stressing out my body was like a big kind of thing that we worked on, gut health, digestion, filling in some holes nutritionally, from the pill, like your B vitamins, magnesium, all the things. Those are some of the big things was, yeah, the sleep, the habits, like working on my like just stress resilience, not being so, just fight or flight all the time.
Yeah, which it's like, it's interesting now looking back, right? Because like I'm sure when we were in that moment where everybody's home, right? Nobody, it's almost like, at first glance, like, oh, this is the perfect time for this. Like this person's not going to be, go, 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 out and about, all this different stuff. Like there is a little bit more, I guess, control, or the environment can be a little bit more controlled for somebody. And then obviously months of people stuck in their house, it's like it went too far in the opposite direction as far as stress is concerned. But it's just, I think that lifestyle component is probably the biggest thing. We talked about this recently, and I've referred to it now like 3 times this week, where we do a Q&A on Instagram Live with a couple other coaches, and somebody messaged in where they were like, hey, I am a nurse that works overnight shifts, 12-hour overnight shifts, and I want to compete. What should I do? And everybody gave their piece, and I was like, honestly, don't compete. Like if that's your career and that's really what you want to do, is there ways around it? Yeah, sure. Can you be, can you make it to the stage? Yeah, but maybe you don't make it to the stage the way that you want to because of that huge, difference in terms of like how conditioned you get, and But on top of that, you're also now you're accepting this level of stress, right? In terms of a bodybuilding show, but you haven't even contemplated the level of stress that you're in every day. And now when we do see these down regulations, the adaptations that take place during a dieting phase that's that aggressive, you're asking your body to recover now in this environment that's already so stressful as far as your day to day is concerned. Like there's going to be scenarios where it might not be possible for you to recover with that looming concept of what your just day to day job is. You know what I mean? Like, is it worth that plastic trophy for you? I don't know. But again, I think it's just one of those things where it's like, and that's not birth control, obviously, but a similar concept as far as recovery is concerned, right? So it's just one of those things that I think people that we automatically dismiss the lifestyle component, right? And it's like, even somebody that's been on birth control, we have somebody on the team that was on birth control for whatever it was, 10 years, right? And then they came off birth control, and it's almost like, there was no recovery there, right? And we tried for, I don't know, 2 years to get a recovery, and there's just nothing, like no blip on the radar. And it's almost one of those things where it's like, I would have to wonder that the lifestyle that you live with or without birth control, would you be severely down regulated, just based off of that stress and that lifestyle that you're living on its own? Forget about any hormonal
Mhm.
intervention. You know what I mean? And that person is a very go, 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 go. Does everything, obviously, because she has that type A personality. So I know she's doing what we asked her to do, but it's just this overwhelming, like, always something is go, 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 go.
Mhm.
Like there's no downtime whatsoever where it's like, just watch something on Netflix tonight, please.
Yeah.
But again, I'm fading here. It really comes back to the lifestyle and really creating that environment for yourself to be successful as far as recovery is concerned, whether it is post show or coming off of BC or any type of hormonal intervention like that. So yeah, I think that's a big one. To prime the body before you come off, can be a big one. So now you're working with Victoria. You came off the birth control while you're working with her.
Yeah, so we kind of worked on that, stuff for like 5, 6 months, and I came off of it in September. Um, so yeah, it was a little
And
bit
then
of kind of working on it, but there's kind of like no rush, been on this thing for 7 years. Like let's,
yeah,
check all the
Exactly.
I,
boxes.
So how was that recovery process for you? Like, was it, I mean, I'm sure for many people it can be frustrating, whether it is a post show, whether it is birth control, whatever. How was that process for you? Was it like longer, harder, easier than you expected? Did you hit a point where you got frustrated, where you're like, fuck this shit? Talk on that.
Yeah, I would say if I was expecting it to be long, but I remember it feeling longer. And the only thing that really helped me with like the length of time, and this is something I definitely would encourage people to do, is put together your health timeline. So put together like everything your body has been through, medications, major life events, illnesses, etc., things outside your control, and then come back to that timeline as far as like moving forward and maybe give yourself a little grace. And that was like big for me, was like, okay, like holy shit, like, this is, everything I've been through, everything my body has put up with, been through. It's going to take a little more than, 6 months. And I was kind of expecting it to take at least a year to get, my period back and get my cycle back. And um it ended up taking like 9-ish months. I would say I got it back the following summer. But after a moment of like, fuck this shit, like you said,
Yeah.
like it was kind of like, okay, like I'm doing all the things, like what the hell?
Yeah.
And honestly, like, so I was really like working on my gut health, like that was a big part of it. Thyroid, like we talked about, all the things that are important to get your cycle back online. But I think the two things that made the biggest difference for me, are we surprised? Stress. So one, went on my honeymoon, right? So had a good vacation. And then two, I um had a like started doing a lot of like body work. So like a lot of like massage therapy and stuff like that. And with that, I started doing like ice baths and really working on my breath
Mm.
work and that sort of thing. And I swear to God, I did this like kind of once a week kind of intense like body work stuff and breath work along with that. And I got my cycle back like a month after I started doing all that. So I think it was like
Wow.
a combination of those two things on top of already supporting my gut, supporting my thyroid, and the stress and just like really working on like that stress resilience. Which I think breath work is big for that.
100%. I wonder how much the ice bath, like the ice bath thing is very interesting to me still in terms of the anti-inflammatory effects it's going to have. It's just one of those things where it's like, because it's our industry, everything has to be like white and black. And it's like, no, it reduces muscle building. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe that shouldn't be the goal right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder how much of an impact I've seen that have very real impact on some people, especially a few of my women that I can think of off the top of my head. And I've seen it, have very little impact. So it's just interesting that one where, you put it into certain environments, the impact that it can have. And I know you're talking on something a lot bigger than that. You're also doing the breath work. You're also getting, that placebo effect of even things like massages. I forget, I think it was us that were talking about that recently, right? Where it's like, people, go for this concept of like mobility and all this other stuff. And it's like, do we know that works? I don't know that we do. Like the research might not be there to support it in all reality, but we definitely know that there's a placebo effect that happens there, and how real that placebo effect is evident here. You know what I mean? So it's pretty cool how we see that kind of stuff, do its thing here, and kind of be a player. And what you think is the comeback here, but it's also, you brought up the honeymoon and that relaxation and kind of just taking yourself out of your environment and totally right, and just kind of like away from your schedule. Away. How long was the honeymoon?
It was like a week.
And how where was that relative to when you got your cycle back? Like it was almost immediately that you got your cycle back around that time, or
No, it was about like 2 months later, but we also know what you did 2-3 months ago probably
yeah,
affects your
100%.
current cycle.
Yep,
So
yep,
um so yeah, I think that definitely had something to do with it. And just like you were
sure,
saying, your nervous system. I mean,
yep,
it's everything. I mean, affects your gut, affects your thyroid, like all the things that we're trying to support. Like, well, what's on top of that? Like what's, the
yep,
layer behind that? And I think that's where, I mean, you were saying, before about like, oh, is it the birth control? Is it the lifestyle, driving, this low hormone environment? Well, if you're somebody that's always chasing like that dopamine or chasing like something to do and you can't just sit there with your own thoughts, like
Yep.
Okay, well, your body is always running from a tiger because the tiger's in your brain, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
even something physical. And I think that's it for so many people.
This is the reason why I wanted to have you on. Like, this is so, like, I've already referenced like 19 things that happened this week. There's another one where it's like, you know,
It's what I'm
I
sending
think
to so many clients.
well, I think it was also a conversation that we were having where I was talking to a previous client and they're working with somebody that we all know really well right now. And they left me because they felt like they weren't being challenged enough. And they have the mentality where they have to be challenged constantly. And I'm like, you know, you got to realize this is a post show too of all times. And I'm like, you know, you got to realize that, you know, the challenge is in front of you.
Yeah.
It's whether you want to accept this challenge or not, to learn how to be still, to learn how to, like, you know, focus on just that developmental process of a bikini competitor. Like, you know, get, you know, build the muscle. It takes time. It's not something that's going to happen in, you know, 2, 3, 4 months. And then it's like, okay, what's next? It's like, nothing's next. Let's just keep going here, and we keep doing it. And we're you know, it's the process that we're here for and enjoying. And like you said before, with the off season, this is an opportunity for you to go, you know, whatever it might be more involved as a mother, potentially be more involved with the work that you're doing as far as your professional life is concerned. You know, what are the hobbies that make you, you know, feel good about yourself, and be more involved about this, right? So yeah, it's just it's a very you know, there's a consistent theme here for sure that we can kind of go back to. But so now we are we got the period back, but I'm curious, you mentioned the thyroid a couple of times here, and you mentioned the gut health. Was that still, were you working with Victoria at the time?
I kind of stopped working with her like around the time that I got my cycle back. So that was
You
2021.
stopped working with her around that time. So you were working with her during the gut phase.
A little bit. Mark helped me more with that. So my current coach, Mark, was more on the gut side of things. She was more on the
Okay.
hormones.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So when did, was that something where it was like, hey, let's see what's going on, or was there severe symptoms going on there?
The more symptoms like lots of loose stool, bloating, that sort of thing. So working on that, I think, was definitely a part of getting the cycle back in 2021. So we did, like, I would say, like dysbiosis kind of protocol, you could call
Did you
it,
guys run a GI map beforehand, or was it more along the lines of addressing the symptoms?
addressing symptoms.
Okay, gotcha. So and did you feel like that had a positive impact as far as the symptoms that you were dealing with?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, like, again, like it's all like a part of it was kind of working on that. And then continuing to work on that, right? Like not letting like the
Yeah.
habit slip. Um, like, like the fasting kind of thing, or too much caffeine, like all those like kind of triggers that, were ultimately, kind of contributing, um,
Mhm.
was also a big part of it.
So now you have your cycle back. You're linked up with your current coach, and when you link up with this new coach now, what's the conversation like in terms of goals for Sarah?
So I actually started working with Mark at the end of 2020. Um, like right around that, like the time I came off the pill.
Mhm.
And I mean,
Oh,
it
really?
was,
So okay, so it was a dual thing then. It was okay. I got you. I'm with you now.
yeah, yeah. Like I was working with Victoria before him. So kind of kept working with her, she was like consulting, was kind of how I was running.
Right. Yeah, gotcha.
But yeah, so like with Mark, it was just like, hey, like you were saying, like, but I knew how I needed to be pushed. I was like, I want you to push me to gain weight and
Yeah.
build muscle, because I was still under 110 pounds at that time.
Well.
So, and again, like I said, like I'm 5'4", and my feedback was like I needed a lot more muscle. So,
Mhm.
that was, kind of what I came to him, was like, hey, like I want somebody that is going to really kind of push me here to do what I need to do, and also keep my health, in mind too, and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, now we're here 2024, and I've been just I mean, haven't cut at all. It's always been a building phase or a health phase, since my show.
Mm. So how? So wait. So that's what? How many years are we working on now? When'd you do the show? 2018.
2019.
2019. So I guess what, 5?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Going on it. So yeah,
I
And
but
it
that's a
miss
almost
good
got
thing
to the
Sarah.
point
though.
where I was like, do I call this an off season or
I mean,
like,
we
Yeah.
thought we talked about this at length. We had Dominic Cusa on last week or the week before that, and it was literally solely about off season and making sure that people are taking their time. And we brought up multiple cases where we know individuals that took 4-year off seasons, 5-year off seasons. And I know yours is a little bit more complicated in the sense of
Yeah.
like, kind of developing yourself to, getting everything working appropriately. Right.
Mhm.
But it's also, obvious. How much do you weigh today?
126.
Yeah, so there you go. So you're going in the right
Shit.
direction. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's not like you put on any body fat. I mean, you clearly have, developed yourself well throughout the process. So and you're always posting videos of you training well and getting after it and doing all that different stuff. So of course it's an off season still. If you have the, the mindset that you're going back in to compete again. But again, I think it's one of those things where it's like, that's a good point, maybe, where it's like looking at some of the people that we know that took long off seasons to solely develop themselves and get to that next level of competing, right? Versus your long off season, which you were developing yourself, but it was in a completely and totally different way in terms of
Mhm.
getting healthy. But it's like, that's almost more, I don't want to say more admirable, but it's more, you know, I don't know, probably something that people should be looking into as opposed to just having that mindset of the grow, 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 grow. I mean, we've all seen competitors that have done this maybe once, twice, a few times in their career. And, for them to get to that next level, they need to take the time to get their body operating well, right? And it's like that in and of itself might be the difference maker between somebody becoming something that they are, more proud of or happy with in terms of walking off that stage and having those stage pictures, let alone maybe taking the next step as far as their career is concerned within competing.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's where why I'm so big on health, along with the bodybuilding, the physique stuff, because that's all you got, right? Is your health, and I mean,
Yeah.
like, sadly, like, yeah, you keep chasing the bodybuilding thing, but then what happens when you're, almost 40 and, you've just been dieting, your whole life back and forth. And yeah, it's like, like, it's like, it sucks, right? Like, because,
Yeah.
you're not 29 anymore and, have that resiliency. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it just kind of is what it is. That's physiology.
Yeah, and being 38 years old and having been in this for as long as I have, and doing it for as long, it's just one of those things where it's like you can. There's always somebody to look at to fuel that fire that you have to fuel or justify, what it is that you're. Well, that person's 55 years old and they're still
Yeah,
going.
he's
He
doing
looks
it.
great
Yeah.
at 55. Yeah, I want to be that person or whatever it is, and it's like you don't like how individual we all are, and what really makes us different from a genetic standpoint, because I think when we talk about genetics still in our industry, it's more about, our physique, the way that it's shaped, and like whether we're great at building muscle or losing fat, when in reality genetics is so much more than that. And it's like, my resilience level for me personally isn't there to be able to continue with a lifestyle at the age of 30, when I know plenty of 38-year-olds that can. It's just my body is beat up. It hurts. Like it doesn't work the way that I want it to work anymore. And to your point, there should always be a thought process of life after competing. And for anybody too, no matter what level you're competing at, but obviously there's a justification at a much higher level. But again, the reality is, I am somebody with 3 kids, and I have a 4-year-old, and I want to be able to continue to play with my 4-year-old without my shoulders feeling like they're going to fall out of their sockets, or my knee swelling up with water, or whatever the case might be. You know what I mean? There's a very seriously, it's you say that, but like I'm dealing with a midlife crisis here, and and I'm opening myself. She's laughing at me because she knows I've been dealing with it for a little while, and I
Yeah.
feel
Oh.
like an old, I'm just bitching left and right at this point about what my body's capable of and what it's not capable of. But again, maybe
Yeah.
if I would have taken more time there to be able to recognize some of these things and make certain adjustments, not so late in the game for me. You know what I mean? Like it was for me, a lot of these things, weren't as recognizable until I was in my mid 30s, just because of where I started versus where maybe you guys started, right? Like we didn't have this big push for better. Again, my body is beat up. Mechanics, though, as far as training is concerned, until we were, until I was so far along that it's almost like I could look back and say, how many years did I spend destroying my body with poor mechanics and poor execution as far as training is concerned, to where it's like now I'm 38 years old, and am I going to need a knee replacement in the next 5, 6, 10 years or whatever a doctor will touch me as far as I might, right? There's a realistic possibility there. So, but again, if I would have taken more time in between, right, and like continually or educated myself maybe a little earlier on, right, to be able to have that kind of pivot point in my career and learn how to do things better instead of just chasing it and chasing it and chasing it and chasing it. Maybe I would be in a position at the age of 38 where I still have a few years left, but it is what it is. Health now. So go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I would say that educate. I mean, that's why I think we're all so big on education, right? Is because
Yeah,
then at least, and you can make the decision that's most aligned with your values, right? Like, is it worth it?
100%.
Is it not? Weigh the pros and cons, look at the situation as a whole, like a whole, and then,
Yeah.
kind of make your call from there.
Yeah, good call.
Like
So now, obviously, we'll speed up a little bit here because it's almost 10 a.m. I feel like we got a pretty. Is there anything else that you feel like you could add to that conversation? I want to hear about Fortify a little bit before you go. But
Yeah.
yeah, is there anything else you feel like you can add to that to be able to help? I think we touch on everything well enough. I do think where Marina was going there for a minute was a good one. I feel like sometimes the stress of getting that cycle back, especially when it does, there is a longer, recovery period. It becomes the stress that's kind of preventing somebody from getting their cycle back. I don't know if that's something you want to touch on or if there's anything else you had to add.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that was that case for me, but I do definitely think there is like protocol burnout, like where it's like this is the one thing you're focusing on, or it's becoming your identity. And I don't think that's, healthy, speaking of health. So I definitely think like working on like the mental aspect of it, having things like outside of the gym, outside of like your health as like, a focus are huge for anybody. And yeah, I think just seeing like all the areas you can be improving and like working at those things in a steady way, not in a, white knuckling it kind of way, but in a,
Yeah.
hey, like focusing on these behaviors, focusing on these things that are going to make me better. And that's where like training was just, I mean, training was the biggest thing for me because it was like, okay, like I see the numbers, like I'm getting better, like, looking for all the ways to progress. And I mean, that's my favorite part of all this, is the training.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think that's a good one for anybody listening that's going through it, but also coaches that are helping people go through it, making sure that it's not, just solely based around and we talked about verbiage and how important verbiage can be in this like same exact thing. The verbiage that we're using when we're talking to some of these individuals, some of these women is also, it's necessary when we're talking about things that impact our health. You know what I mean? Putting it in that light all the time, it's like you're going to make somebody feel unhealthy.
Totally.
So was there what about for anything else that you'd want to add to that though before we move on?
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think, well, maybe that's a hot topic. It's like, oh, can we train if we have amenorrhea or in health cases? Like, do we need to pull down training? I think, yeah, sometimes we need to scale volume, scale intensity. But I think if you enjoy training and it's not coming from a place of like, I have to go to the gym because I hate myself or because I'm going to get fat if I don't, or, whatever, like keep people doing what they like to do, just help them understand and help them scale and, adjust with what their body is able to currently recover from. Um, but
I
yeah,
also think that's a big. I think that's a big one too. When it's like again, from a coach's standpoint, like what are you looking at to be able to? Are you taking everything into consideration when it comes to the lab work specifically, the individual, and kind of putting those two things together? Because what does the lab work say? Is the lab work saying that there are maybe some adrenal issues going on there where it's like, okay, maybe now we could justify bringing down the training a little bit, but like, sometimes, and especially when it comes to coming off of birth control, like, do we, what else do we talk about coming off of birth control? Oh, it's
reverse
post show.
diving.
So I guess
Yeah.
that's a little bit different. Everybody's gonna be training at that point. But coming off of birth control, it's like, I see that all the time where it's like a preemptive thing where it's like, well, your testosterone is low, so you can't train. And it's like, well, that's not really like fair. You know what I
well,
mean?
yeah,
Like
and
it
training
should
helps
probably be
increase
more.
testosterone.
Yeah, it should probably be a little bit more pieces to the puzzle than that.
Yeah.
And like I said, looking at everything in totality and not just taking this one snippet of something and saying, well, this has to change everything. It's like, well, let's be a little bit more
Yeah. And last thing
considerate than
I'll
that.
say on that is like on the client end of it or athlete end, don't just look for that one snippet and that fits your narrative, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
don't just, oh, well, they said
bias.
I can train, so I can train 7 days a week. Or
Yeah,
Sarah
that's the
said
other side
ice
of it.
baths helped her get her cycle back. So I'm going to do an ice bath every freaking day,
Good
Like,
call.
no, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about putting everything together. And that's actually a good point to probably finish off here is that with everything that we did touch on here, you ran the freaking gamut. you did it all. You know what I mean? Like and even from that kind of like fitness lifestyle concept, like you did it all, whether it's the show and then the recovery coming off of birth control, like healing your amenorrhea. But again, to get to that point, it was everything from a gut health phase. You looked at the thyroid, did some things for the thyroid that we barely touched on other than the gut health. And then, it was, prepping yourself to come off the pill. All of these different things took place. And then we talked about the other modality, ice baths and all this different stuff. It's like, and that's great, but it's also one of those things, to your point, where it's like, I don't know what word I want to use here. Balance, maybe. But being able to pick and choose what we need, where we need it, and when we want to focus on something as a tool to be able to service us at that particular time.
Right.
So what about now getting into where we're at now? Are we holding you too long? It's 10:03.
No, we're good. I knocked out some check-ins before this, so Fridays are a lighter day for me.
Awesome. So now we're getting into Fortify, which again, we've had Meredith on. I respect the hell out of both of you guys. I know this is the first time we've actually had any type of formal communication, but you're one that's been around for a while and you've continued to progress as far as the coaching is concerned. And I think honestly, from the outside looking in, you are probably one of the more respected or maybe even recognized females that are in that kind of like little circle of that the functional health fitness industry, coaching industry that we all know of right now. And again, you've been there, you've been progressing so long. I see it all the time where people are like, we've all seen it, where people are throwing their hat into the coaching ring, and then there's not this real progression. There's not, I don't know if they're doing education on the back end or anything. Whereas, I've probably been on multiple different things with you as far as educational pieces are concerned. Watch you kind of go through that, but now you and Meredith being able to go do your own thing together, it's just cool. I like see, like, for a while there, the teams for me were kind of like this cringy thing that really didn't turn me on very much. But now getting to see good people do it together, it's like, it's cool to see you guys go your own way, especially Meredith, who'd been going to do her own thing, but like as part of a different team, seeing you guys do it together, it's like, I know you guys are gonna really, do some good things.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. So that was born at the very end of last year, Fortify Health, and yeah, just I like collaborating. I think, just probably clear from my story too. Like I like, working with other people, getting other perspectives, and Meredith is, I mean, someone I respect the hell out of, and
Yeah,
to
same.
work with anybody and kind of move forward together, like definitely her, was kind of a no-brainer when kind of stars aligned to make this happen. So we're both really excited just to like really kind of continue to educate like other people from our experience and just level up together. It's because we talk behind the scenes to each other about different cases and whatnot. So like being able to be a team of coaches together to talk about different ideas and different ways of doing things is also really exciting for me.
I wonder, do you guys have anything in the pipeline or thought process as far as doing some educational things yourselves? I think, all due respect to you, and like I said, I just laid out how far you've got, but Meredith is one of those people where it's like she's very, very easy to listen to, and kind of like, I don't know if it's even maybe just her tone, kind of like very, to me, one of those people. It's very easy to listen to, very easy to understand, very easy to comprehend what she's putting down. I feel like from an educational standpoint, she's one of those people that has so much to offer. Do you guys have plans for that?
Yeah, and I really hope she listens to this and hears you say that, because I completely agree. But we do plan on, that's what we're really starting in 2024 is doing a lot of work on the writing side of things to really kind of lay out, what we want to say, like what we want to bring to the industry, bring to the world as far as that education piece, and then how we're going to go about actually offering that education, whether it's courses or small kind of mentorship kind of group things, but we definitely do have plans on that side of things.
That's great.
Awesome. I know we'll both be on the lookout for that. That's something that we'll be excited for sure. Marina will definitely be there. I'll force her to be there.
I was
She's
going to
still
say,
in that
make sure you're
educational phase.
subscribed to our newsletters, because our newsletters and blogs are all going to be very education focused, starting
I'm
with
gonna get on
actually,
that.
yeah, menstrual health, or female health, and we're starting January with a lot of just menstrual cycle stuff, like this things they should have taught us when we were 14 but never did.
I love it.
So before we let you go, quick question for you is, you've talked a lot about a lot of good people here. We just Meredith being one, Victoria Felker, your current coach Mark, Bill Campbell. And you brought up a lot of names, which is pretty cool and awesome that you've been around all these people and you've been able to take pieces from them. Any one person that you could think of, or however many people that you feel like have had a big impact on you and your development as a coach specifically, and or your educational process, maybe even more so?
It's so hard to just choose one because can I choose? Can I do three?
Yeah, of course, go for it. Yeah,
Okay, so
whatever works.
I'll say Victoria and Mark, my current Mark Dominic, have both been huge, for me, just personally and then professionally too. Just kind of seeing how they do things, like Mark really on the training side of things and the emphasis there with his clients, and then Austin, as well, just working with him. 2021 started mentoring, with him. Austin's been huge too.
100%. Yeah, that's our prerequisite is you got to work, you got a mentor under Austin to be able to have clients. So yeah, all right, awesome. Listen, it was great to have you. Anything else that you want to add in there? Maybe well, I guess you'll do that part, right? You do the outros and she'll tell you to
Yeah. So where can people
yeah,
find you
there
via
you go.
Instagram or wherever?
Yeah. So I mentioned our newsletter. So www.fortify-health.com is our website. You can sign up for our newsletter there. We have some free resources available that you can download, some paid for resources as well. If you're interested in the education piece, we got some gut health, some hormone kind of stuff there, liver love, all that kind of stuff that we love to preach and tell people to support. And then our Instagram is fortify_health_coaching. Working on maybe changing that handle, but gotta maybe get some people to give up theirs.
Yeah.
And then I'm
We
on
love that one.
Instagram at Sarah Ford Bishop.
And then also the podcast is a good one too, if you want to plug out all
Yeah,
three of you guys.
podcast links are all in our bios for that, but Unnamed and Untamed is our podcast with Sonia Spiel, meet myself and Meredith. And yeah, we've got a couple episodes, a month, from there, and lots in the archives.
Yeah,
Great.
I think that's honestly a really good one too for a lot of the male coaches that do have a lot of female clients. Like, that's one of those ones I feel like they might even skip right over it when they see it's a female, but it's like, that's where you get that kind of like, that point of view. Honestly, it's super,
Agree.
super valuable from that perspective.
For sure.
But yeah, listen, we appreciate you coming on. Honestly, it was awesome.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I will be keeping my eyes peeled on that newsletter, but also for your prep this year. I'm so excited to see how you look after 5 years. So that is exciting. But thank you again. And everyone, thank you for listening. Remember, we also have this on YouTube. It's at the end. I don't know why I'm saying this. But we'll catch you guys next week.